The city's concrete peaks clawed at the gray morning sky, but inside the headquarters of Sterling and Finch Global Bank, the air was a distilled blend of polished marble and cold ambition. Anna Reid, 22, adjusted the crisp, slightly too large blazer that was her sole professional garment, feeling the familiar hollow ache of a girl operating miles above her meager means. She was the definition of brilliant poverty. A scholarship kid from a rough neighborhood, now a summer intern in the most cutthroat division, her future staked entirely on this one 10-week opportunity. Failure was not an option. It was a return ticket to financial ruin. Anna's desk was a temporary island in a vast, open-plan sea of mahogany and glass, overlooking a panoramic view that mocked her student loan balance. She focused on the glowing spreadsheet, a dizzying matrix of derivatives and risk assessments that most full-time analysts struggled with, yet she had already optimized the model by 15%. This wasn't just work, it was a surgical operation to prove her worth, to cauterize her past. The atmosphere in the executive suite, the Gilded Cage as the junior analysts called it, changed when Martha Roberts Sterling, the bank's CEO, arrived. Sterling was a Wall Street legend, a man whose tailored suits cost more than Anna's annual rent, whose handshake could seal a multi-billion-dollar deal or crush a career. He was 55, silver-haired, impeccably preserved, and possessed a gaze that felt less like an appraisal of her work and more like an inventory of her person. His power was an almost physical force, silencing the usual office chatter, compelling attention. Every woman within view subtly adjusted her posture. Every man straightened his tie. Sterling paused near Anna's desk, a deviation from his usual direct path to his corner office. The motion was subtle, yet the entire floor seemed to hold its breath. "Miss Reid?" His voice was a deep, smooth baritone, the kind that carried authority effortlessly. "I see you've been tackling the R7 projection. The efficiency gains are remarkable, truly remarkable." Anna looked up, adrenaline spiking. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I found a few redundancies in the legacy code." She tried to keep her voice steady, professional, masking the frantic pulse in her throat. He leaned in, his imposing frame dominating her small space. The gesture was a calculated, subtle violation of professional distance. "Redundancy is the enemy of profit, Miss Reid, and I appreciate an employee who understands where to cut the fat." His lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile that didn't quite reach his cold, assessing eyes. The smile lingered, not on her spreadsheet but on her face, her uniform, the nervous tremor in her hands. It was the first chilling, predatory gesture, a silent promise of undue attention, a test of her boundaries. "Keep it up. I like what I see." He emphasized what I see with a low, private tone, a possessive shift in his gaze that sent a spike of ice down Anna's spine. Then, he straightened and walked away, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and an air of profound unease lingering over her workstation. Anna stared at her screen, the numbers blurring, realizing with a sick lurch that the internship wasn't just a battle against burnout and debt, it was a battle against him. The hook was set. She had caught the eye of the predator, and in this gilded cage, she had no escape route, only a ticking clock. The weeks following Mr. Sterling's initial approach were a tightrope walk for Anna. She buried herself in data, working 18-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and the desperate prayer that her undeniable competence would overshadow her undeniable presence. Her strategy worked, at least professionally. She didn't just meet expectations, she obliterated them, single-handedly correcting a major error in the bank's emerging markets portfolio that saved them millions. This victory, however, only tightened the net. Sterling didn't issue a public commendation. Instead, he initiated a series of subtle, yet targeted interactions designed to isolate her and elevate her status just enough to make her vulnerable. He moved her desk from the open floor plan to a small, semi-private alcove near the executive wing, ostensibly for easier access to senior resources. The location felt less like an honor and more like being placed in a display case. One Friday evening, after the trading floor had emptied out, Anna was organizing a stack of complex bond documents when Sterling appeared in the alcove doorway, holding 2 crystal tumblers. The air immediately grew thick with unspoken meaning. "Miss Reid," he said, his voice softer than usual, stripped of its corporate bark. "You've done exceptional work this week. That portfolio correction was the sort of quick thinking we usually reserve for managing directors. I insist we mark the occasion. He extended a glass filled with amber liquid. It was a gesture masquerading as professionalism, a gilded hand offering a poisoned apple. Anna felt a tremor of fear, but her deep-seated training to never turn down an opportunity from a superior kicked in. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. But I don't drink on the job." Sterling chuckled, a low, patronizing sound. "Nonsense. This isn't the job, Anna. This is mentorship. This is how the real deals are cut, how the real power brokers operate." He placed the glass on her desk, the clink of crystal against wood sounding deafeningly loud. "I see a future for you here. A very bright one. But you need guidance, special guidance. Special mentorship, a thinly veiled private invitation." It was the moment the professional boundary completely dissolved. Sterling stepped closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The truth, Anna, is that talent like yours needs protection. Protection from rivals, protection from the grind. I could open doors for you that wouldn't exist for 10 years otherwise." He gestured vaguely toward the city lights twinkling outside the panoramic window. "But success requires trust, absolute trust." Anna's heart was hammering against her ribs. She looked at the glass, then at the man whose eyes promised a kingdom, but whose posture suggested ownership. She desperately needed that kingdom. The crushing weight of her reality slammed into her. The mounting medical bills for her younger brother's rare genetic condition, a burden that far exceeded her scholarship and meager intern stipend. Anna's crushing debt is revealed. She was financially drowning, and Sterling knew it. He hadn't just studied her resume. He had studied her financial profile, her vulnerability. He was offering a life raft made of brass and deception. The choice was clear: integrity and ruin, or compromise and salvation. The financial chains were tightening, pulling her closer to the siren's lure. She picked up the crystal glass, the ice cubes rattling in nervous rhythm, but didn't drink. "I appreciate your offer, Mr. Sterling. I'll ensure I maintain my absolute trust in the bank's mission." Her refusal was veiled, polite, but firm, a small act of resistance that she knew would not go unpunished. Sterling's smile vanished, replaced by a momentary flash of predatory impatience. The hunt was on. Anna's carefully phrased rejection in Part 2 was immediately followed by a chilling, subtle shift in the office atmosphere. Sterling was polite, even jovial, but his eyes held a calculating coldness. He began communicating almost exclusively through his personal executive assistant, MS. Chloe Davis, a woman in her late 30s with a perpetually weary expression and a guarded, almost invisible presence. Chloe delivered documents and requests with a silent intensity, her glances at Anna conveying a mixture of pity and warning. The real tension resided in the silence. The special mentorship was off the table, replaced by a strange, passive aggression. Anna was now tasked with impossible projects under absurd deadlines, but always projects deemed critical by Sterling. The intention was clear: either comply or crumble under the workload. Anna's resolve hardened, but her isolation deepened. One Tuesday, Anna stayed late, meticulously auditing a complex compliance report. A senior analyst, David Chen, a quiet man who had worked at the bank for 15 years, lingered by the coffee machine, watching her. David had always kept to himself, but tonight the silence seemed to compel him forward. He approached her alcove tentatively. "Anna," he began, his voice barely a whisper, a sound swallowed by the cavernous office. "You're burning the midnight oil again. You should be careful." Anna nodded, pushing a strand of hair from her tired face. "I know, David. Just a lot to get through." David leaned against the partition, his gaze fixed on the mahogany door of Sterling's office. "It's not the hours I mean, it's him." He paused, chewing on the unspoken word. The unspoken rule was the atmosphere itself, a pervasive knowledge of Sterling's appetite that no one dared voice aloud. "You impressed him, Anna. That's a good thing normally. But with Sterling, attention is currency, and he always expects a return on his investment." His confession was measured, desperate, delivered with the heavy weight of years of complicity. He spoke of the reputation, how Sterling exclusively targeted bright, ambitious, and financially vulnerable young women, pressuring them to choose between their dignity and their future. "It's a rotation, Anna. They come in talented, they catch his eye, they disappear. We all know it. We all look away." David's eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. A senior colleague hints at Sterling's reputation. Just then, the glass door to the Human Resources Director's office opened, and a scene unfolded in sharp, brutal clarity. A young woman, Sarah Liu, a sharp, attractive junior associate who had been hired 3 months prior, walked out, her face pale and streaked with silent tears. She carried a small cardboard box filled with personal effects. The HR director followed, stone-faced, providing a boilerplate explanation to the nearest manager. Restructuring. Position eliminated. Anna froze, the complex compliance report falling from her lap. She remembered seeing Sarah being called into Sterling's office late the previous week, a private meeting that had seemed unusually long. Anna's heart pounded with a terrifying realization. Sarah was independent, talented, and single. Sterling's interest had clearly been rebuffed, and now, here was the consequence. Anna witnesses an abrupt, unexplained termination of another attractive young female employee. The scene was over in 30 seconds, but the impact was seismic. Sarah's tear-stained face was a mirror reflecting Anna's imminent future. David Chen gently retrieved the papers from the floor. See, Anna? Tension build. That's how it works. He doesn't fire you for cause, he eliminates the position. Cleaner. Untraceable. He patted her shoulder clumsily. You shine too brightly here, kid. Get out before he makes you dim. He left quickly, his fear palpable. Anna was left alone in the deepening twilight, the warmth of the coffee turning cold, realizing the unspoken rule wasn't just about complicity, it was about survival. The image of Sarah Liu clutching her cardboard box and weeping silently haunted Anna. It solidified her fear into cold, hard certainty. Her exceptional work was not protection, it was merely bait. 2 days after Sarah's restructuring, Sterling summoned Anna directly to his sprawling corner office. This was not an informal chat by the alcove. This was an official audience behind locked doors. Anna walked the distance, feeling every inch of the plush carpet amplify the sound of her pounding heart. The office was ostentatious, a monument to unfettered capitalism. Sterling was seated behind his massive desk, not working, but waiting, like a spider aware its prey had finally entered the web. Close the door, Anna, please. This conversation requires absolute discretion, Sterling commanded, his tone shifting back to the smooth, proprietary baritone from the night he offered the drink. He gestured to a leather armchair opposite his desk. Anna remained standing. Is this regarding the compliance report, Mr. Sterling? I completed the final audit this morning. Sterling sighed, a sound of theatrical exasperation. He rose and walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. This movement was deliberately intimidating, designed to make Anna look up at him. The professional facade was completely dropped. Let's stop pretending, Anna. The report is irrelevant. Your intelligence is remarkable, yes, but your value to me is something far more interesting, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. He placed his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her slightly, forcing the intimacy. I offered you a path, a fast track to success that women, especially women with your financial burdens, rarely get. You hesitated. I don't tolerate hesitation. He then presented his vile proposal, the ultimatum. Here is the new reality, Anna. You can accept my patronage. You will be my confidant, my partner in the private hours. You will receive the most lucrative assignments, the highest bonuses, and a guaranteed promotion to associate vice president by year-end. Your brother's medical bills will become a negligible concern, and your future is assured. His eyes were cold, demanding immediate surrender. Anna felt a wave of nausea. Her body screamed no, but the phantom weight of her brother's debt pulled at her mind. Sterling saw the internal struggle and pressed his advantage, the cruelty now naked. Or, he continued, his voice hardening, you choose the path of integrity. And if you choose that, I have already prepared your first assignment, the Project Phoenix portfolio. It is structurally flawed, designed to fail, and requires over 90 hours of work a week. You will be held personally responsible for the inevitable collapse. You will fail publicly, spectacularly, and be terminated for gross incompetence within 30 days. No one will hire you again. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. It is not a choice between dignity and success, Anna. It is a choice between doing things my way and being destroyed. I don't care about your character. I care about your compliance. Choose. personal favors for career advancement, or a pile of impossible work designed to break her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Anna looked into his eyes, not the eyes of a banker, but of a predator. She took a deep shake, her mind racing. She could not sell her soul, but she could not afford to be destroyed. Her voice, though trembling, was clear. "I need 24 hours to review the Project Phoenix materials, Mr. Sterling. I will deliver my decision tomorrow afternoon." It wasn't a surrender, but a plea for time. Sterling smiled, a triumphant, wicked flash. The trap had been sprung. Anna left Sterling's office in a daze, the oppressive scent of his power clinging to her clothes. She didn't head back to her alcove. Instead, she fled the office tower entirely, needing to breathe air not filtered by wealth and corruption. She found a sterile, dimly lit storage closet in the basement parking garage, sinking onto a cold concrete step behind a stack of unused cardboard boxes. The 24 hours Sterling granted her felt less like a reprieve and more like a countdown to execution. The weight of the ultimatum, prostitution or professional annihilation, was unbearable. The tears that finally escaped were not tears of fear for herself, but tears of agonizing helplessness for the one person her entire life revolved around. Her younger brother, Jake. Anna's breakdown. She pulled out her phone, scrolling past the complex bond spreadsheets and landing on a photo. Jake, 15 years old, smiling brightly from a hospital bed, a thin tube running into his arm. His smile was fierce, a testament to his fighting spirit, but the photo didn't capture the daily reality. The source of her crushing financial burden was revealed. Jake suffers from a rare, chronic genetic condition, requiring constant, cutting-edge medication and frequent specialist care not fully covered by their limited state insurance. Their single mother worked 2 minimum-wage jobs but was constantly drowning. Anna's prestigious university scholarship covered tuition, but the cost of living and, more importantly, Jake's escalating medical copays formed a mountainous, insurmountable debt. Flashback sequence. The memory flooded her. The meeting with the hospital administrator 2 months prior. The crisp, detached voice detailing the required payment for Jake's next crucial gene therapy sequence. "Without this treatment, Miss Reid, his condition will deteriorate rapidly. The total is $78,000. We need a commitment of $20,000 by the end of the month." $20,000. Anna's entire summer intern salary was barely a tenth of that. The pressure had been relentless, pushing her into this high-stakes internship, chasing the mythical entry bonus that could save her brother. Now she was face-to-face with the devil who knew her price, Jake's survival. Noidatham lan king kanja roinukmut. Anna clutched her phone, her knuckles white. She whispered Jake's name into the dusty air, a desperate prayer. "I can't let you go. I can't." The image of Sarah Liu flashed again, the consequence of refusal. But the image of Sterling's arrogant, possessive smile, the expectation of her complete capitulation, ignited a spark of fierce, protective rage deep within her core. "I am not a commodity. My brother's life is not currency for your depravity." The moment of pure, blinding despair gave way to a cold, clear resolve. She would not sacrifice her integrity for a paycheck earned in shame, but neither would she allow Sterling to destroy her career, and by extension, condemn her brother. She realized that leaving the bank immediately would still mean failure and financial ruin. The system Sterling operated in was built to crush the vulnerable and protect the powerful. She wiped her tears fiercely with the back of her hand, standing up. The time for fear was over. Sterling wanted her to choose between 2 paths of ruin. Anna decided she would forge a third path: survival, justice, and exposure. She needed evidence, a defense, and a weapon. The fight would not be fought on his terms. The breakdown had cleared the fog. Now, the plan for resistance had to begin. The next afternoon, Anna stood before Sterling, her composure a fragile shield protecting a core of iron resolve. The 24 hours had been spent researching, not agonizing. She had analyzed the legal frameworks, the bank's internal reporting policies, which she quickly recognized as toothless, and the potential for retribution. "Mr. Sterling," Anna began, her voice steady, professional, and devoid of the fear he expected. "I have reviewed the Project Phoenix portfolio, and I appreciate the immense responsibility this task represents." She paused, letting the corporate phrasing hang in the air. "Anna refuses to comply." However, I must decline your offer of patronage. My commitment is to the ethical execution of the bank's financial mission, nothing more, nothing less. Sterling's carefully cultivated mask of charm shattered instantly, replaced by a cold, incandescent fury. The air crackled with suppressed violence. You have made a grave mistake, Miss Reid. You seem to misunderstand the nature of power here. I didn't ask for your commitment to the bank. I asked for your commitment to me. He didn't yell. Instead, his voice dropped to a level of chilling finality. Sterling unleashes the impossible workload. Very well. You have your wish. Project Phoenix is now exclusively yours. Every analysis, every projection, every piece of compliance, it all reports directly to me, and only to me. The deadline is 2 weeks. Failure to deliver perfection by that date will result in immediate termination for breach of contract and gross incompetence. Consider this your final test. He pressed a button, and his executive assistant, Chloe, entered immediately, her face confirming she had heard everything. Chloe, ensure Ms. Reid has all the necessary and voluminous documentation for Project Phoenix. Anna accepted the mountain of binders and digital files, the pile of impossible work, with a determined silence. The project was indeed rigged. Critical data was missing, the models were deliberately corrupted, and the scope was far beyond what a single intern could handle. It wasn't designed to be completed. It was designed to be a weapon of professional destruction. As she returned to her isolated alcove, Anna knew her fight had officially moved underground. She couldn't leave, because abandoning the field meant instantaneous financial ruin for Jake. She had to stay, survive the impossible workload, just long enough to gather the ammunition she needed. Anna starts documenting everything covertly. Her phone, carefully placed under her monitor, became her greatest ally. She began taking timed, time-stamped photos of the impossible project load, the deliberately confusing instructions from Sterling, and the constant late-night texts demanding updates outside of work hours. She documented her perfect attendance, her prior successes, and, most crucially, any communication that hinted at Sterling's pattern of coercion. She used a secure, encrypted cloud storage service, creating a digital fortress for the truth. The isolation was crushing. She worked until 3 a.m., slept on the couch for 3 hours, and was back at her desk before dawn. Every interaction with Chloe, every sideways glance from a junior analyst who had seen Sarah Lou leave, reinforced the truth. She was alone. Realizing she can't fight the battle alone, she was fighting a system, not just a man. She needed allies. She needed outside intervention. The bank's walls were too thick, the loyalty too bought. Anna looked at the timestamp on her phone, 3:15 a.m. She needed a lifeline, someone outside this gilded cage who still understood the meaning of real justice. The time for corporate rules was over. The time for outside intervention was now. Anna was a ghost of her former self. 5 days into Project Phoenix, she had barely slept, subsisting solely on 3-hour naps and the frantic, spiking adrenaline of self-preservation. The project wasn't just impossibly difficult, it was overtly malicious. Key datasets were encrypted with continuously shifting passwords. Critical compliance documents were deliberately misfiled across secure and insecure bank servers, and Sterling's internal team was actively counter-messaging her detailed queries, wasting hours of precious, non-renewable time. She was running in place against a colossal corporate machine explicitly designed to grind her into professional dust. The emotional and physical exhaustion converged, crushing her spirit. Her usually sharp, precision instrument brain was foggy, slow, and unresponsive. She stared at the monitor, where a single critical variable, the very number that exposed the project's inherent fraud, had just vanished, replaced by a line of meaningless, gibberish code. This was not an accident. This was direct, personal sabotage. Sterling was engaging in corporate torture, supremely confident that she would either yield her body or shatter her mind completely. The isolation became absolute. David Chen actively avoided her, his gaze filled with pitiful guilt. Chloe, the executive assistant, continued to deliver new impossibly complex binders every morning, her eyes silently pleading for Anna to just resign and escape. The price of maintaining her integrity was becoming terrifyingly clear. Jake's very life. If she failed, and was fired within the next 9 days, she would be professionally blacklisted, unable to secure the necessary $20,000 needed for his urgent gene treatment. Sterling's ultimatum had not merely threatened her career, it had threatened her entire family's existence. She slid off her ergonomically designed chair and crawled desperately under the massive mahogany desk, curling into a tight fetal position, seeking the complete darkness and the cold, unfeeling steel of the frame. The sheer effort of the fight had drained her last vital reserves. The tears came then, not the silent, contained professional tears she had wiped away in the parking garage, but deep, agonizing, uncontrollable sobs that shook her entire slender body, muffling violently into the expensive wool of her blazer. A whisper of pain, moment of emotional breakdown. This was her true rock bottom, the precise moment she faced the devastating, soul-crushing cost of her resistance. She felt utterly defeated, not by the overwhelming workload, but by the sheer cosmic unfairness and weight of the world's cold indifference, perfectly embodied by Sterling's hateful entitlement. She wept profoundly for Jake, for her overburdened mother, and for the hopeful young woman she had been before she ever entered this predatory corporate tower. After a vast, agonizing period, the raw emotional storm finally subsided, leaving her feeling hollowed out but possessing a strange, cold, clear-headed resolve. Defeat is only real if I personally stop fighting. She understood she could not possibly fight Sterling, the powerful CEO. She had to find a way to fight Sterling, the exposed criminal. But how? She desperately needed a heavy, institutional hammer, a monumental disruptor, someone operating far outside the bank's toxic, corrupt ecosystem. She needed someone who knew her history, trusted her implicitly, and operated strictly by an incorruptible code of justice, not by corporate profit. She pulled out her old, battered personal phone, a relic from her simpler college days. She scrolled past dozens of names, former classmates, sympathetic professors, old neighborhood acquaintances, until her finger finally hovered nervously over a contact she hadn't touched since the day of her graduation. Ilara Vance. Her childhood best friend, her most trusted confidant, the one person who knew every intimate detail about Jake's tragic medical condition and Anna's high-flying dreams. They had inevitably drifted apart after college, life quickly taking them in wildly divergent directions. Making this call felt like admitting total, absolute failure, a desperate final plea for an impossible rescue. The risk of involving any outsider was monumental, bordering on catastrophic. But the alternative, complete capitulation or professional destruction, was now certain. Anna swallowed the last bitter vestiges of her pride, her hand visibly shaking as she decisively pressed the call button. The subsequent ringing sounded impossibly loud and intrusive in the vast, silent, dark office. Ring. Ring. She pressed the phone to her ear, listening to the dial tone echo unnervingly into the silence of the Gilded Cage, praying fervently that the woman on the other end still answered to the desperate, whispered call of a friend in dire need. Her last, most fragile hope was now hanging entirely on a single long-distance connection. The line clicked, and a crisp, professional voice answered, Vance. Not the familiar, casual, hello? Anna was used to, but a tone of deliberate, focused readiness. Ilara? It's Anna, Anna managed, her voice thick and raspy from the storm of weeping. A momentary, surprised silence. Then, the professional barrier cracked. Anna, oh my God, I haven't heard from you in forever. How are you? What's going? Ilara stopped abruptly, hearing the raw, undeniable distress coding Anna's words. Anna, what's wrong? You sound awful. Where are you? Anna couldn't hold back the torrent. Huddled under the desk, whispering into the phone, she poured out the nightmare. The internship, Sterling's predatory advances, the impossible ultimatum, the systemic corporate sabotage, and the devastating threat to Jake's medical funding. She detailed Sarah Lee's termination and the constant, suffocating fear. Ilara listened in complete silence, a silence far more terrifying than any verbal reaction. When Anna finished, exhausted and ashamed, Ilara spoke, and her voice was no longer that of a college friend. It was sharp, authoritative, and utterly cold. Anna, listen to me very carefully. You must not resign. You must not consent to anything. Do not delete anything. Document every single text, email, and task assignment, no matter how trivial. Do you understand? Yes, but Ilara, I'm being professionally destroyed. I'm under his direct command. I need to leave. No, Ilara cut her off, her voice suddenly lowering to a deeply serious, confidential tone. The unimaginable twist. You cannot leave, because you are now an asset in a federal investigation. Anna, I need to tell you something you need to trust me on implicitly. The reason I drifted away after graduation is because I was recruited immediately after law school. She paused, then delivered the truth like a bullet. My full name is Special Agent Alara Vance. I work for the federal government. My unit is the White Collar Crime and Public Corruption Task Force. I specialize in corporate misconduct, specifically financial institutions like Sterling and Finch. We have had soft intelligence on Robert Sterling for months, years actually, regarding potential fraud, misappropriation of funds, and abuse of power, but we have never had the necessary internal penetration. Anna gasped, the sheer weight of the revelation momentarily paralyzing her. Her childhood best friend was not a lawyer, she was a senior federal investigator. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, a tidal wave washing away her utter isolation. The person she had cried to in desperate helplessness was the exact institutional force required for her salvation. You're the FBI? Anna whispered incredulously, disbelief and sudden hope mingling. Not precisely the FBI, Anna, but an agency with much deeper jurisdictional authority over banking fraud. And yes, I am the person who can help you. More importantly, you are now the key, Alara affirmed. The investigation begins in secret. Anna, this is now a high-stakes federal case. You are no longer just an intern. You are a confidential informant. Sterling thinks he has backed you into a corner of compliance or failure. We are going to use that certainty against him. You will play the game, you will show up, you will work the impossible hours, and you will continue to document the professional harassment. But now, you are doing it for us, for justice, and for every woman he has ever targeted. Alara's voice warmed with fierce, protective loyalty. You came to me for a lifeline, Anna. This is it. You have to be strong. You have to be brave. I know about Jake. We will protect your family. Now, let's talk strategy. Anna finally stood up from under the desk, gripping the phone, the crushing despair replaced by a burning, focused purpose. The weeks that followed the conversation with Alara transformed Anna from a desperate victim into a federal asset operating deep behind enemy lines. The weight of her fear was replaced by the exhilarating, exhausting pressure of dual identities. By day, she was the failing intern, relentlessly battling the insurmountable chaos of Project Phoenix. By night, she was Agent Alara Vance's covert informant, meticulously detailing the structural abuse of power. Their initial strategy was simple, yet terrifying. Anna must continue working under Sterling, acting as Alara's undercover asset. She reported to Alara nightly, using an encrypted, secure application on a burner phone Alara had overnighted to her. Alara taught her the language of evidence, timestamps, verifiable metadata, and the critical difference between professional pressure and criminal coercion. Anna focused on documenting Sterling's pattern. The impossible demands, the late-night personal text messages disguised as work check-ins, and the explicit linkage between her professional failure, the engineered collapse of Project Phoenix, and her refusal of his patronage. Sterling, sensing her continued defiance, doubled down on the sabotage. The pressure mounts as Sterling gets impatient and aggressive. He stopped using polite, veiled language and began communicating his displeasure through increasingly aggressive emails. Miss Reid, your progress on Phoenix is appalling. I expect a personal meeting in my office at 7 a.m. tomorrow to explain this catastrophic delay. Be prepared to discuss your dedication to this firm and your future here. These emails, of course, were immediately flagged and secured by Alara as evidence of professional harassment and intentional obstruction. Anna's most challenging task was maintaining the facade of failure without actually failing to deliver documentation. She had to appear overwhelmed, constantly one step behind, yet she covertly fixed many of the systemic errors in Project Phoenix, ensuring the data was traceable and verifiable, a contingency plan if she was suddenly pulled from the field. She spent her days walking a razor's edge, appearing incompetent to Sterling while demonstrating extraordinary resilience to Alara. One evening, Sterling's impatience reached a critical peak. He cornered Anna at the photocopy room, far from the security cameras Alara had helped her map. He dropped the last pretense of professional courtesy. "Anna," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "The Phoenix presentation is due in 3 days. You are far behind. I know you know how to fix this. It's simple. Tonight, my apartment. We can review the data, and I can adjust the timeline for you." He leaned close, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. "You choose the hard way, and your family suffers. You choose the easy way, and you're the next managing director." Anna met his gaze, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her chest, but her voice was unwavering. "I am dedicated to completing the project through professional channels, Mr. Sterling. Any data review can be conducted here, in the office." Sterling's face contorted with cold rage. He understood. She wasn't just refusing him. She was defying him in a way he couldn't publicly retaliate against without exposing his true motives. He stepped back, a dark promise in his eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Reid. But games end, and when this one ends, you will regret every choice you've made." The interaction was perfectly documented by the voice recorder Alara had embedded in Anna's ID badge holder. The trap was deepening for Anna, but Sterling was unknowingly digging his own grave with every aggressive move. Sterling was done with subtlety. He needed Anna destroyed and removed before Project Phoenix's imminent manufactured failure could be traced back to his deliberate sabotage. The following morning, Anna arrived at her desk to find a new, formal internal memorandum waiting. The date of the Project Phoenix presentation, the critical deadline, had been abruptly moved up. The impossible deadline was now 24 hours away. The memo, signed personally by Sterling, cited urgent market conditions and investor pressure as the reasons for the accelerated timeline. The true reason was a direct, lethal escalation of his war against her. He was giving her no time to sleep, no time to prepare a final defense, and crucially, no time to transfer her meticulously gathered evidence to Alara. Simultaneously, Sterling unleashed the final, most sophisticated phase of his attack. Sterling orchestrates a major compliance failure and attempts to frame Anna. He sent out an internal email, with Anna copied, instructing her to urgently upload the deliberately flawed and corrupted initial Phoenix data to the bank's main SEC reporting system. The message contained a subtle yet massive structural error, an omission of key risk disclosures that, if processed, would result in a severe six-figure regulatory fine and a major internal compliance breach, with Anna's digital signature attached. The consequence would be immediate termination and professional blacklisting, completely bypassing the official 2-week review period he had promised. Anna read the email, the blood draining from her face. This wasn't just failure. This was career death and criminal liability. She had been tasked to complete an upload that would make her appear either grossly negligent or criminally fraudulent. She had 3 hours before the automated system finalized the daily SEC submission. The situation was the definition of tin tiet him niao, tin mu không thể vượt qua, tin huang tin mu không thể vượt qua. Anna immediately excused herself to the restroom and contacted Alara on the secure burner phone. Her voice was strained, the panic barely contained. "Alara, he's moving faster. He's trying to frame me for a compliance breach today. If I upload this data as instructed, I'm done. If I refuse the instruction, I'm terminated for insubordination. We need a physical intervention now, or I'm out of the game." Alara's response was sharp and immediate. "Do not upload anything, Anna. We know he's trying to corner you. We don't have time for a full raid yet, but this move is a mistake on his part. He's using his personal, unmonitored server access to push these last-minute instructions, thinking it's untraceable. He just gave us the entry point we needed." Alara, understanding the urgency, pivoted the entire investigation's focus. The priorities shifted from documentation to extraction. "Anna, you need to use this emergency. We need the physical evidence of his systemic fraud, not just the coercion. We need to access his private server and download the core manipulation files that prove he rigged Project Phoenix to fail." The ultimate goal was to prove the fraud was directed by Sterling, not incompetence by Anna. "You have less than 3 hours. Get to the data core. Now." Anna looked back at her desk. The monitor blinking, the toxic email from Sterling demanding the immediate upload. She knew accessing the secure data core was a violation that could land her in jail if caught, but submitting the fraudulent data meant the end of everything she had fought for. The risk was monumental, but the potential reward, the irrefutable proof of Sterling's criminality, was the only thing that mattered. The ticking clock was deafening. forcing a terrifying, irreversible choice. With the SEC submission deadline ticking down, Anna executed the riskiest maneuver of her life. She sent a professionally vague reply to Sterling, confirming receipt of the compliance upload instructions, but stating she was performing final due diligence on the disclosure protocols. This bought her approximately 90 minutes. Alara, now coordinating remotely from a surveillance van, strategically parked blocks away, guided Anna through the bank's internal security blueprint, which she already possessed from years of intelligence gathering on the firm. The target was the highly secure Tier 1 server room, which housed the main data repository, and, critically, the one private encrypted server Sterling used for all his shadow accounting and fraudulent internal projects like Phoenix. Anna used the pretext of her impossible workload to gain access to the secure area. She told the data room technician she needed to retrieve archived physical backups for Project Phoenix, demonstrating the panicked desperation of an intern on the brink of failure. The technician, pitying her, granted her temporary access, but warned her that the executive server cluster was strictly off-limits and monitored by motion sensors. Once inside, the real challenge began. The air was frigid, filled with the loud, monotonous hum of cooling fans. Alara and Anna used the emergency to seize a crucial piece of digital evidence. Anna moved quickly to the inconspicuous white server box labeled SNF Executive Private Data. She pulled out the miniature, preloaded encrypted drive Alara had provided and located the seldom-used diagnostic port. As she plugged in the drive, the office lights outside the server room flickered. Anna's blood ran cold. Motion sensors triggered. She looked up and saw the small, unblinking red light of the internal camera staring directly at her. Sterling, anticipating her frantic attempts to fix her failure, had likely set an alert on his personal device for any activity near his private server. Anna was risking immediate discovery and arrest. Anna had only seconds. The drive was loading the core files, the undeniable proof that Sterling had created Phoenix, using phantom accounts and offshore shell corporations to manipulate stock value, a systemic fraud far exceeding simple harassment. She watched the progress bar crawl, 50%, 60%. Every second was an agonizing eternity. Just as the bar hit 75%, her secured burner phone vibrated frantically. It was Alara. He's on his way back to the office, now, abort and hide. Anna ignored the command. The files she was grabbing, the complete, irrefutable data set of Sterling's white-collar crimes, were the only thing that could save Jake and convict Sterling. She needed 100%. She pulled her jacket over the drive and the blinking port, crouching low beside the humming server rack, trying to blend into the shadows as the success notification finally flashed green on the tiny screen. She swiftly unplugged the drive and concealed it in a hidden pocket of her blazer. Seconds later, the heavy magnetic door to the data room burst open. Sterling was standing there, his face contorted in triumphant rage. He hadn't seen her, but he knew she was there. "Reid, what in God's name are you doing in the Tier 1 room?" he roared, his voice echoing off the metal racks. Anna stood up, affecting the look of a panicked, clumsy intern. I was trying to find the physical backup files for Phoenix, sir. They were misplaced. I desperately need the original data before the deadline." She offered a flimsy binder of blank paper as proof. Sterling didn't believe her for a second, but he didn't see the evidence. His priority immediately reverted to the compliance upload. "Get out, now, and upload that SEC data immediately or you are finished. Do you hear me?" Anna hurried out, the small, warm drive secured against her chest. She had executed the double cross, narrowly escaping discovery. She had the professional death sentence, the SEC upload, waiting at her desk. But now, she also held the ultimate weapon, the truth. Anna raced back to her desk, the private drive containing the undeniable evidence burning a hole in her pocket. Sterling followed moments later, standing over her, his presence a dark, suffocating shadow. "Upload the data, Reid. Now. That clock is ticking. You have 10 minutes before the system auto-locks the SEC filing process." He was reveling in the final seconds of her forced demise. Anna sat down, opened the fraudulent email, and looked at the upload screen. She had two choices: upload the flawed data and become a scapegoat, or refuse and be fired instantly for insubordination. She took a deep breath, meeting Sterling's triumphant glare with a calm, unnerving resolve he had never witnessed before. "I won't be uploading that data, Mr. Sterling," Anna said clearly, her voice echoing slightly in the sudden quiet of the executive floor. "That data contains material risk omissions that would result in a fraudulent SEC filing. I refuse to commit a crime for this bank." Sterling exploded. "You insolent little pauper. You're fired. Security. Get her out of my sight and off this floor." Just as he reached for his office phone, the main floor security doors hissed open, and the entire atmosphere of the Gilded Cage shattered. The exposure, the takedown, 4 figures in dark suits and matching vests, moving with professional, silent speed, flooded the executive suite. Leading them was Agent Alara Vance, her face stern and focused, presenting her badge with cold authority. "Robert Sterling," Alara's voice resonated through the stunned silence. "This property is secured. We are executing a federal warrant based on evidence of systemic financial fraud, insider trading, and corporate coercion. You are under arrest." Sterling was paralyzed, his face transitioning from purple rage to ghastly white disbelief. He looked frantically at Anna, then back at Alara, recognizing the deep protective bond between the two women. The twist was complete. The victim and the investigator were linked. The agents moved swiftly. One placed Sterling's phone and computer in evidence bags. Another moved toward Anna. "Miss Reid, we need the physical evidence immediately." Anna, with trembling but determined hands, pulled the encrypted drive from her blazer and handed it over. The agent secured it. Sterling finally found his voice, a high-pitched, desperate snarl. "This is insane. I'm the CEO. This is a hostile takeover. I'll ruin you all." Alara stepped directly in front of him, her eyes burning with focused vengeance for her friend and all the victims. "Gujamdok Chiuhin Fat Lao Li, the CEO faces punishment. The evidence is irrefutable, Mr. Sterling. The data extracted minutes ago confirms the systematic manipulation of Project Phoenix to defraud investors, including the precise files linking you to Sarah Liu's illegal termination and the countless others you coerced over the years." She looked him dead in the eye. "The game is over." As 2 agents attached cuffs to Sterling's wrists, his tailored suit suddenly looked cheap, his power shriveled into pathetic fear. He was led past Anna, his face etched with venomous hatred, but he was silenced by the gravity of his defeat. The entire office floor, the managers, analysts, and Chloe, the executive assistant, watched in stunned, absolute silence as the great Robert Sterling was escorted out in disgrace. The raid was complete. The predatory system was exposed. Anna, though physically exhausted, felt a clean, fierce wave of justice wash over her. The silence of the corporate machine was now the silence of deep-seated accountability. The arrest of Robert Sterling sent a seismic shockwave through Wall Street. The immediate aftermath was a media frenzy, but the real public reckoning came months later in a federal courtroom. The trial and the public reckoning became the most anticipated corporate misconduct case of the decade. A true David versus Goliath showdown. Anna, under the protection and guidance of Agent Alara Vance, became the government's star witness, the quiet, principled center of a national narrative about corporate corruption and predatory behavior. The courtroom was packed daily with journalists, legal scholars, and former Sterling and Finch employees. Sterling, stripped of his CEO title and relying on a formidable legal defense team, maintained a facade of arrogant disbelief, painting Anna as a disgruntled failed intern seeking retribution. The prosecution, led by a ruthless federal attorney, meticulously built its case using the evidence Anna and Alara had secured. The digital files from the private server proved the intricate web of systemic fraud, stock manipulation, and money laundering that had been Sterling's true business for years. The voice recordings and emails proved the professional coercion and ethical breaches. The most damning moments, however, were delivered by the victims. Testimonies from former victims, including the woman from Part 3. Sarah Liu, the junior associate who had been restructured, Part 3, testified with tearful conviction, detailing Sterling's exact predatory script and her resulting humiliation and financial hardship. She was followed by 2 other young women who had left the bank years earlier, their careers derailed after they refused Sterling's advances. Their collective stories painted an undeniable pattern of abuse, showing that Anna was not an isolated incident, but the last person in a long, painful queue. Anna's testimony was the climax. She spoke with quiet, unwavering clarity, detailing the mounting debt for Jake's care, the impossible ultimatum, the terror of working under the pressure of professional ruin, and the moral certainty that forced her to risk everything. She described the chilling moment she found the rigged SEC data, realizing Sterling was willing to destroy her reputation and possibly break the law to cover his tracks. She spoke not just for herself, but for her brother, and for the principle of integrity that Wall Street had long discarded. The defense lawyers attempted to tear her down, focusing on her financial vulnerability and her association with her long-lost friend, the federal agent. But Anna held firm, her honesty cutting through the legal rhetoric. The climax arrived with the jury's verdict, guilty on all major counts, including wire fraud, insider trading, and obstruction of justice. Gajamdok Chuhin Fat Lao Li. Sterling's face when the verdict was read was a mask of cold, petrified despair. His world had finally crumbled. The sentence delivered days later was severe: decades in federal prison, a monumental fine, and complete forfeiture of his assets. The public reaction was massive. Op-eds hailed Anna as a hero. Protests erupted outside the bank, demanding immediate corporate reform. The message was clear: power does not grant immunity. The corporate giant had fallen, brought down by the courage of a single, impoverished intern. The dust of the high-profile trial slowly settled, leaving a changed landscape at Sterling and Finch Global Bank. With Robert Sterling convicted and facing years in federal prison, the interim leadership, desperate to salvage the bank's reputation and avoid further regulatory penalties, initiated a massive internal reform. Anna, no longer just a witness or a victim, had become the catalyst for this institutional cleansing. The first profound moment of relief came when the federal government, acknowledging Anna's indispensable role and severe financial sacrifice, arranged for a protected fund to cover the bulk of Jake's immediate and future medical expenses. The crushing financial burden, the primary chain Sterling had used to bind her, was lifted. Anna watched her brother, surrounded by specialists she could now afford, receive the necessary gene therapy sequence. Seeing him truly stable, truly safe for the first time in years was the moment of true, personal catharsis, the end of her private war. The second, more public shift involved the bank itself. The board of directors, facing shareholder outrage and public scrutiny, reached out to Anna. They didn't offer to complete her internship, they offered her power. Catharsis Dong Lun. The head of the board, Mr. Alistair Crane, a man who represented the old guard but recognized the dire need for new direction, met with her personally. "Miss Reid," he stated with sincere humility, "you exposed the rot that we, through negligence or fear, allowed to flourish. We need more than just legal counsel now. We need integrity built into the very structure of this firm. We need someone who understands the vulnerability of our employees." Anna returns to the bank on the board's request, not as an intern, but as the new head of HR development. Her mandate was radical: to completely overhaul the bank's internal reporting mechanisms, ethics training, and, most crucially, create a robust, independent framework for investigating and prosecuting workplace misconduct, specifically targeting power imbalances and harassment. Her position was non-negotiable, her authority absolute in her domain, reporting only to the ethics committee and the board. Anna accepted. She didn't return for revenge, but for systemic change, to build the sanctuary she desperately wished she had found when she first entered the bank. Her new office was not the isolated alcove, but a spacious, light-filled suite adjacent to the executive wing, a constant, tangible reminder to any future predatory executive that power now had a conscience. The day she officially started, Alara called. "You did it, Anna. You won the financial war, the legal war, and now the institutional war. You're building a fire escape for everyone else trapped in those towers." Anna smiled, looking at the city skyline outside her window. No longer seeing a cage, but a canvas for change. "I'm just making sure the next intern doesn't have to choose between their job and their soul, Alara. We changed the rules." She remembered Sarah Liu and the countless others. Her journey of terror had culminated not in defeat, but in a profound, healing mandate. She was now the protector, the systemic defense against the abuse of power. The former impoverished intern was now the institutional conscience of Wall Street. 3 months into her tenure as the head of HR development, Anna Reid was no longer merely surviving, she was thriving. Her purpose anchored firmly in systemic change. Her office, once a symbol of Sterling's unchecked ego in the executive wing, now felt like a bastion of true corporate justice. She had successfully implemented the Integrity Shield program, a mandatory, anonymous third-party reporting system for workplace misconduct, bypassing the fear that Sterling had once weaponized. She hired Sarah Liu, the terminated junior associate from Part 3, to manage the new department's intake unit, offering her not only a job, but a chance to rebuild her career and self-worth. The change wasn't just structural, it was palpable. Employees no longer walked the executive floor with veiled caution. The atmosphere was less cold, less cutthroat. The Gilded Cage had begun to rust, replaced by a culture of accountability. Anna sat at her expansive, clean desk, reviewing the initial reports from the Integrity Shield program. The volume of reports was high, a clear indication of the suppressed pain the old regime had created, but the trend was positive. Genuine issues were being addressed swiftly and fairly, not buried or ignored. Anna's first day in her new office. She paused, looking out the massive window. The skyline view was different now. She didn't see her crushing debt reflected in the glass. She saw the promise of a stable future for Jake, who was now home, attending school and enjoying his life as a regular teenager. His condition manageable thanks to the financial security she had secured through her integrity. A polite knock interrupted her thoughts. It was her new executive assistant, handing her a small, thick envelope marked simply, "To Anna Reid, head of HR development." The paper was plain, the handwriting neat but unfamiliar. Anna opened it and began to read. It was a letter from a young man named Ethan, who had just started his summer internship in the restructured investment banking division. "Dear Miss Reid, I know you probably don't have time to read this. I'm just an intern, and I'm frankly terrified. My parents sacrificed everything for me to be here. But the first thing we were given during orientation wasn't a manual, it was a personal video message from you, explaining the Integrity Shield program. You spoke about how this bank used to operate, about the unspoken rules, and about the power of speaking the truth. You said, the bank's success depends on your safety, not your silence. Miss Reid, I'm poor. I have massive debt. My manager just asked me to work a project with impossible hours, and I was about to quit, thinking this place was just another sink or swim trap. But because of your story, because you literally brought down the previous CEO to protect people like me, I decided to use the shield. I reported the predatory workload. Within 3 hours, HR stepped in, adjusted my hours, and ensured my manager was formally disciplined. She receives a letter from a young new intern thanking her for changing the bank. I'm staying. I'm fighting for my career the honest way. You didn't just expose a crime, you changed the DNA of Wall Street. Thank you for making this Gilded Cage safe for the next generation." Anna lowered the letter, her eyes blurring slightly. This was the true victory. Not the conviction of Sterling, but the silent, profound shift in power dynamics. The chance for Ethan to thrive without having to sell his soul. The circle is closed. She now protects the vulnerable. She had turned her pain into permanent protection for others. Her legacy wasn't just a powerful title. It was the ability to help the poor intern find safety in the high towers of ambition. The emotional journey was complete. The wound was healed, replaced by a lasting, powerful purpose. Well, friends, that's it. The story is now complete. We've watched Anna transition from a terrified intern to a powerful change agent. If you're still with us at this very moment, something in this narrative, the fight for dignity, the struggle against overwhelming odds, or the final triumph of justice, has surely touched your heart in a profound way. Now, let's take a moment together to reflect on the core lesson here. Anna's journey is a powerful reminder that while we cannot control the external actions of corrupt people like Sterling, the injustice, the pressure, the toxic environment, we maintain absolute control over our inner integrity and response. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, we are disturbed not by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens. Anna's healing began the moment she chose courage over compliance, turning her immense pain into a purposeful, external reform. Her true power was not in fighting Sterling's external strength, but in mastering her internal decision to not be corrupted. Remember, your character is your most valuable asset. Hold on to it fiercely. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share this powerful message of integrity with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dive narratives that prove true strength comes from within.